All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you guys for being here. Glad to see you again tonight. We're about ready to get started here. I'm sure there will be some people coming in as we get going, but we're going to get started with prayer here in just a second. Shelli is going to share with us first this evening about exercise, and then Jesse has some stuff to share with us about sleep. So some good topics there. I know you'll pick up a few things that you can implement and add to your repertoire of skills and knowledge that can help us all be a little bit healthier. So just want to let you know that the folders you got, you can bring those back tomorrow night. There will be some other handouts you'll get as well. So if you just want to bring those and stick those in there, then you can keep everything together. But that's up to you. But there will be some more tomorrow night. So, all right, with that, let's go ahead and say a prayer together, and we'll get started. Father in heaven, we are grateful for the life that you've given us and the ability of our bodies to do these amazing things. Lord, we pray that as we learn together this evening, that we will also grow, that we will be able to implement some of these things that we're learning together and have a healthier, more vibrant, and happier life that you want for us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I think I know a lot of you guys, but some of you guys I don't know. I am Shelli Stevenson, McClung, Jesse's wife, and I happen to be a physical therapist. And I've been a PT for probably close to 18 years now, and I've worked in mostly sports orthopedics. So I get to spend a lot of time exercising with people and getting people stronger after they get injured or if they hurt their neck or low back. So this is kind of my wheelhouse of life, which I love to work. I love what I do, and I also love to just help other people become more active and stay active. So I hope you guys learned some valuable things tonight, and also don't get overwhelmed by maybe some of the things I'm going to talk about. The idea is just to help inspire everybody to get a little healthier, whether that's going to the gym and exercising or moving a little bit more. So hopefully you're going to hear some information you might already know, but hopefully also some new information. And maybe dispel some myths that you may or may not believe. So yeah, I'll get started. So how many of you guys know how many muscles are in the body? Anybody want to take a shot? Just rough number. Shout it out. 400. Good guess. Anybody else? 1,000. Also a good guess. Right in the middle. 600. 600 muscles. So it's a lot of muscles. And I think this picture is so awesome because I don't know how many of you guys have a medical background and have seen a picture or have actually seen like a cadaver of a body, but essentially right under the skin is red, healthy, optimal kind of muscle tissue. So we have a ton of muscle. And I think a lot of times we just think, oh, it's just a bunch of organs. No. There's so much muscle. There's also 206 bones, which is a lot of bones as well. And so I think the skeletal system in general is just absolutely fascinating, as this picture kind of describes. And I think if you believe in God and you just think about how amazing it was that he created our bodies the way he did, it's pretty fascinating. So it's fun to be able to kind of talk about this with you guys and also help educate you on how we can make this awesome system function better and be advocates for God in our lives. So, good things come to those who sweat. So this is just, I like this because, again, good things come to, especially in like the exercise world, you always feel better when you sweat, but also I think we can, if we are healthy ourselves, we can be better advocates for other people and help them get healthier in their lifestyles. So this next picture is a picture. Guess how old this lady is? 89. Okay, good guess. Okay, good guess. She is 100 years old, okay? And she is deadlifting 150 pounds, okay? She earned the Guinness World Record of powerlifting just before her 100th birthday. That's pretty impressive, right? So this whole idea of, well, when I'm older, I don't want to get hurt, I can't lift weights, false, okay? And I'll talk about this as we go, but this is just so inspiring, and I think hopefully kind of like makes you think a little bit about some of the stuff we're going to talk about. So pretty cool. All right, so let me go back to this page, sorry. Okay, so to the comment, why does muscle matter? And I named it that because, again, muscle is is a large percent of our body, and we can have an impact on muscle, okay? Muscle has an impact on our bone and our entire system, which we're going to talk about coming up. So muscle and exercise, but exercise essentially is kind of a piece of strength training, and building muscle are kind of under exercise. So let's talk about why building muscle and exercising is so important, okay? So one statistic that I think is absolutely crazy is that 1 in 2 women and 1 in 2 men will break a bone as a result of poor bone health. That's huge, okay? Because as we get older, we lose our bone density. And one of the things that doing strength training and exercise does is it increases our bone density. So when you're working your muscles really hard, again, it creates good pull on the bone, and it helps the bones get stronger. And it can minimize your risk of getting that fracture. One of the patients I had early on in my career, she was in her late 60s, and she came in, and I was seeing her for, I think, her knee or her low back. And I was asking her about her fitness, and she said, well, I have been weightlifting for the last 5 to 10 years. And I was like, wow, that's impressive to start weightlifting later in life. And she says, well, I went to my doctor and I got diagnosed with osteoporosis in my low back and my hips. So I decided I was going to start going to the gym and learning how to lift weights. And she said, I don't want to take the medication. I just wanted to see if I could do this. She took her bone density from osteoporosis, out of osteopenia, to healthy, strong bone in about 5 to 8 years, which is huge. So I just think it's something that's, again, we undervalue what exercising, mostly strength training in this particular topic, how it can help us. Okay, the next thing is exercise increases longevity, right? And this is also a very fascinating statistic that everybody's like, I don't have time to exercise. The situation is that for every hour that you exercise, you get back 3.6 hours of additional life. I think it's a pretty cool statistic. So if you think of it this way, you're not spending time or wasting time. You are investing time with a 260% return on investment while improving your health and basically your whole well-being. So it's an investment in living a longer life and living it better, I think. Okay, so obviously strength training increases muscle mass. So as we do strength training, it makes us stronger, it makes our muscles bigger and healthier. And if we think about being someone who is weak compared to someone who is really strong, basically if you are weak, you have a 250% increase in all-cause mortality. So your risk of dying from all the things goes up, which is pretty huge, right? Also, if having good muscle strength improves insulin sensitivity, independent of whether you're losing weight or not, which I think is also kind of cool. Increased muscle mass helps regulate blood sugar and decreases your chance of type 2 diabetes. So all kind of good things there, which some of you guys may have definitely heard about. Exercising obviously increases our cardiovascular health, our heart health, our lung health, and when you exercise, you get a better VO2 max. And those of you who don't know what a VO2 max is, a VO2 max is essentially a measurement of how much oxygen we're kind of consuming when we're exercising. So if you take somebody like Lance Armstrong, who is or Killian Jornet. These are like big endurance athletes. They have a very high number, like 90s of VO2 max, which means they are extremely efficient at using oxygen to get to their muscles, and basically, they can go over a long period of time. So another awesome statistic is that if you have a low VO2, meaning you're not very fit cardiovascularly compared to the higher VO2 max, basically there's a 400% increase in all-cause mortality. So again, huge impact if you don't have good cardiovascular health. So more reasons to exercise and get healthy. And obviously, we get to look a little bit better, a little bit stronger. We get to maybe have a little bit less body fat. Improved body composition essentially means that we have fat in our bodies, which is in some amounts good, and then we have muscle. We want to have more muscle. The more muscle we have, we start to get all these kind of benefits that we're talking about. So we have more muscle and less body fat, which is essentially improved body composition. I thought this statistic was super awesome. Being overweight or obese takes 10 to 15 years off your life. That's a decade or more. So good reason to get moving, get healthier. It's going to make you live longer, get to hang out with your kids and your family a lot longer. Okay, so this slide has kind of a lot in it, but a lot of fun things. So muscle matters because you guys have pulled your back doing something stupid. Lifting something heavy. I'm going to make fun of my husband for a minute because he has a very static job as a dentist, and he'll do something like pick our kid up and like hurt his neck, So it's like these are things that happen all the time, and if you are stronger, you are going to have less injuries. You're going to have less of the I pulled my back, or less of the neck injuries, and then obviously less medical bills over time. All makes sense. Research shows that strength training reduces sports injuries to less than a third, and overuse injuries could be almost half. Who thought that video was awesome? Thank you to my husband for finding that. Okay, see if I can get back to, say what? Sorry, technical difficulties. Awesome. Okay. So I just think that is like the epitome of the why, right? Like, absolutely. And I think I would challenge you guys before I get into this next section, just to kind of like think about your life right now and think about the things that you want to be doing and the things that or maybe you're doing all the things you want to be doing, but you want to do them for a longer period of time. But I think we don't think about how sometimes we kind of let, whether it's pain or whatever, kind of drive the reason why we don't do stuff. But there are ways to get back to doing the things you love to do and be with the people that you want to be with and do things like that, where it's like, I just want to take my granddaughter up so she can put the star on top of the Christmas tree, right? So just be thinking of kind of like your why and like how your life looks and how you feel and where you need support and where you need to do things a little bit differently, so that hopefully you can enjoy life like this grandpa did, which is pretty awesome. So, okay, let's actually talk about what all this all sounds good. It's good benefits. It makes us live longer, all the lovely things. But I'm sorry, I do apologize about how small these letters are. So we're going to talk about essentially what exercise is. The exercise is essentially defined in this way: intentional physical activity to improve or sustain health and fitness, okay? The reason I'm even bringing this up is because I think if we looked at life 100 years ago, we all would agree that we just did more, right? In order to survive, we had to walk places, we had to carry things, we had to work in the garden to get our food. We had jobs that were way more manually oriented, right? We had to it was more of a hunter-gatherer kind of lifestyle in general. Nowadays, we have the lady at the desk who, a lot of people work from desks on computers. We can take cars and we don't have to walk places, and it's just, it's a lot easier that way. So we have to, as a society now, we have to find time or make time to actually move our bodies in a way that we used to do just kind of daily. Now, there are still people out there that have like mechanics, people that have farmers. If you're a person who is moved twice a week. So it used to be like, oh, just get moving, cardiovascular. But now there's this piece of plus muscle strengthening, okay? So when we look at exercise, again, there's these two pieces. First piece is we want strong muscles for moving our bodies in ways that we need to be able to function throughout the day and for our overall health. And then we want to have good cardiovascular fitness, which is essentially heart, lungs, all the things. So we're going to kind of break these down, so you guys have some ideas of how to kind of, if you're somebody who's already kind of moving a lot, you have a manual labor job, this may look a little different for you. But if you're like many of us, we have to find time to make these things kind of happen. Okay, so obviously the theme is, you guys have heard this whole thing already this evening. Building strong muscles matters a lot, okay? So muscle is the organ of longevity. So it is the largest endocrine organ, basically making up 40% of our body. That's a huge number. That's why we're talking about this. So it's not just, oh yeah, we have some muscle. Like, no. We have some muscle that we need to build and get stronger so that we can do all the things we talked about earlier in the presentation. So I love this quote by Dr. Gabrielle Lyon. She's a geriatric physician. She says, muscle is the metabolic sink of the body. It determines almost everything about your body composition and overall health. How you regulate blood sugar, your ability to manage fat, and fuel during times of illness. So it's kind of like everything, all right? So we want to try to leverage this huge organ that we have, which we can do by doing a certain kind of exercises. So who needs to be lifting weights? Hopefully you guys get the theme so far. Is it everybody in this room? Yes, everybody. So maybe not the little girl. I just put her up there because she was cute. But yes, old, young, middle, teenagers, okay? So I think, again, we'll talk in a minute, but there's some certain, I think, kind of stigmas that we think, especially as females, and I'm going to speak to that because I am one, that, oh, I don't want to lift weights because it makes me big, or I should just do the low, like 100 rep kind of things because I don't want to be too big, right? These things are myths. They are not true. And in order to really make ourselves healthier, we have to be doing things a little bit differently. Okay, so I'm going to get on a soapbox for a minute, only because I also do women's health and pelvic health, and this is an area that I absolutely love and I feel like is very under talked about. There's a lot more ligament instability in young females compared to their male counterparts. So it is so important that they're doing some amount of strength training to support their systems to minimize injury for their sports. Young female athletes they're 6 times more likely to tear their ACL than their male counterparts, okay? That's huge. If you're playing, let's say that you have a basketball player, one young man basketball player will tear his ACL, and 3.5 girls will tear theirs. Soccer players, it's one guy and 4 girls. And volleyball, it's one guy, 3 girls. And skiing, recreational skiing for one guy, 6 girls. Huge, huge, huge. So in that category, need to be some amount of strengthening. And then the middle-aged woman, which is me, so I can speak to this loud and clear. So anywhere between 35 to 45, where we have this transition of our hormones going into this perimenopause state. Basically, with the hormone fluctuation, our strength training can help us with body composition changes, getting the fluff, not sleeping well. It can also help us manage our cortisol, because with the hormone fluctuations, our cortisol is a lot higher. And so we have to exercise differently to manage cortisol, and doing that, which I'm going to talk about later, will help tremendously. Also, mental sanity, for multiple reasons. Okay, then lastly, menopause, which essentially menopause is the time in your life, females, where you no longer have had a period for a year. Okay, so post that. We call that menopause or postmenopause. And that is where the estrogen really rapidly declines, and there's massive increases in bone loss. And so you can combat that a little bit by doing strength training. So it becomes really imperative in that 50, 55 age group and older that you are doing strength training, because again, hip fractures, all the things we talked about earlier. So I would love to change the vibe right now that our 20s and 30s-year-old women are starting to exercise more. So when you get in your 50s and 60s, this is a new concept, right? But just like I told you earlier in my talk, you can still do it in your older age and make really awesome changes. So that's my soapbox there, getting off of it. Okay, men. You're not out of the woods here, okay? This is also so important for you. So men tend to lose 3 to 5% of their muscle mass after the age of 30 each year, okay? So this is due to just the natural decline of testosterone. But the good news is you can help combat that by lifting weights and reverse it in a lot of cases. So strength training for you is also very good, and we can reverse this. This is super cool, and he's a fit, healthy person, so this is kind of going to be easy for him, and something that he can do. And so he was super encouraged that there was something he could do, and he didn't just have to go on the medications that don't really work. So I thought that was I was just like, you came to the right spot. Okay, so strength training is what we do to essentially build muscle. Again, I apologize about the tiny font up there. But strength training essentially is resistance training. And essentially what that is the type of exercise that you do to make your muscles work harder than normal against some form of resistance, okay? Outside resistance, or your body weight can be resistance too. We do this by progressively loading the muscle. So we don't start out with like really heavy weight. We start out with, we just need enough to where your muscles are getting fatigued enough to where they're getting challenged to stimulate muscle growth so you can get stronger. So there's generally 2 types of strength training. We have what's called muscle hypertrophy training, which is you're doing essentially higher repetitions with lower weight with a little bit less rest. And then the muscle strength programs, which are going to be more of the less reps, higher weights, and more rest time. Both of these work, and you can do a combination of depending on where you're at. So what I'm going to say here is this. If you're somebody who has never picked up a weight, don't stress out about that. You can use your body weight very adequately. If I had you do 10 body weight squats or to a chair, and that's something you don't normally do, and by 10 and 15, you're kind of ready to take a break, that's hard enough, okay? So you can use your body weight, or you can use extra weight. So if you're somebody who has been working out, so let's say with my gentleman who I just referred to, he hasn't really done a lot of lifting, but he moves well, and so we're starting with learning deadlifts, we're learning squats, we're learning some of these movements with weight, because we need to stimulate more activation of those muscles in his low back, in his hips, to change his bone health. So again, don't be intimidated. There's many scales of how we can kind of make this happen. So we can include, like I just mentioned, body weight, free weights, which would be like dumbbells, kettlebells, machines. So at the gym, this is a great place to start. You just get on a machine, and there's certain machines for different muscle groups, and it's just very straightforward there. Or you can use bands, or again, weightlifting bars and things like that. Okay, so when we talk about strength training exercises, there's two kinds of movements, and I would say for the sake of simplicity, what we want to do is we want to try to do more compound movements. So these are things where we're doing multiple joints at the same time, and they look like what we do all day. So for example, a deadlift. When people say, I don't deadlift, I say, well, yes, you do. How often do you pick up something from the floor? That's a deadlift, right? How often do you get off your chair? How often do you get up from the floor? These are all things you do every day, or you should be. So you are doing those movements. So compound movements are big bangs for your buck because you get to do a lot of things all at once. So essentially, a lunge, a bench press, a pull-up, those things are all compound movements. Let's say that you are somebody who works construction, you do a lot of bending and lifting, and your back is something that you really want to keep strong so you don't get injured. You may supplement some of your stuff with isolated back movements or isolated hamstring and glute movements so that you're really strong with what you're doing. Or if you're like my husband who sits and works on people's teeth all day, then he does a lot of neck strengthening and back strengthening so he can do that for hours and hours on end. So that's how you kind of want to think about your day or your life and what you're doing and what kind of things you're going to be doing. Or if you're just looking for total body, then, again, we can kind of categorize a little bit differently. So this is kind of, if we're thinking about, we want to start doing some strength training exercises. Again, we're going to start with kind of this total body idea of moving most muscle groups in our body first. So we're going to think about maybe like a squat, a deadlift, picking up something up from the floor, doing a push movement, doing a pull movement. And then again, we can kind of supplement with, let's say, for example, I'm a painter and I reach overhead a lot. Then I may want to supplement with some tricep stuff. I may want to supplement with some shoulder presses. So there's little things like that we can kind of add in there. And the other thing I will say here too is that, again, if you're somebody who has a knee problem, a back problem, and you don't have adequate motion, then let's say that full range of motion squat, this is optimal. But I can't do that. That hurts my knee. I don't have the strength to do that. Then we go as far as you can go without pain. We start there, and then we work to get a little lower, or we work to move a little bit more weight. So we're trying as best we can to go through full range of motion, because I think that's an area that I see a lot of injuries because, again, people try to do something that they don't normally do, and they go beyond what they normally do, and then they get hurt. So you want to try to move through as much motion as you can with these motions so that your muscles are getting strong with them. Once you feel comfortable doing, let's say you're starting your program, you're doing a squat, you're doing a deadlift, you're doing a shoulder press, you're doing a pull or a bent over row of sorts, and you go, okay, I got these movements down. Then what is really kind of the most important thing is that I mentioned how the little pink weights don't really do much, okay? And the reason I'm saying that is because if you can do 100 reps of something, it is not hard enough, okay? So what we're looking for getting good muscle hypertrophy, good muscle strength, and getting our muscles stronger overall is that we want to get to where we really only have 1 to 2 reps left in the tank. Okay, that's called reps in reserve. And if we use that kind of principle where we go, okay, I'm going to try to do 20 of these, and I get to 18, I'm like, oh man, I think I could maybe crank out 2 more of these, but that's about it. That's perfect. And we're going to try to repeat that 2 times through or 3 times through. So that's the sets number. So again, if we could do 100, fail. It's not hard enough. We want to create enough challenge that you can only do, I'm going to give you a range here, I gave on the board, from 5 to 20. That's a big range. But the reason I gave you that range is I'm going to give you 2 examples. If I have my athlete who is recovering from ACL surgery, I may want them heavier where they're doing 5 to 10 reps and they're pooped out and they're only doing, 4 to 5 sets. But then my person who's new to these movements, I'm just trying to get them to move through full range of motion, but I still want them to get tired, but I don't want them to get too much load. I'm going to put them more in the 15 to 20 rep category, okay? So again, it's just kind of a scale that we can use to make things harder or easier depending on what you're trying to do. So essentially, if you're coming into a strength training if you're putting together a strength training program, you're trying to get kind of all muscle groups in the body, and I kind of listed those out, and maybe trying to put together about 6 to 10 exercises. So what this kind of looks like, and I realize this is probably very overwhelming if you've never exercised, but what you're trying to do, and this is again kind of in this if we start here, you will see improvements. So we're trying to get in strength training, okay, 2 times a week minimum, up to 4 times a week, with 20 to 30 minutes. So again, if we took 6 exercises, 8 exercises, we do our 3 to 4 sets of, 8 to 20, that's going to be kind of what it looks like, okay? So our workouts should, again, mostly include those compound movements because you get a lot out of them. But we don't have to do 100 exercises where we're isolating a bunch of little movements. We're trying to kind of do big movements because that's what we do all day, just like the guy in the commercial. That was so perfect. He was training to lift his granddaughter. That was the move, okay? So again, kind of be thinking of what do I do? What do I need help doing? And then we're going to design our program kind of around that. So we're striving for 1 to 4 sets with 5 to kind of 20 repetitions. So again, this is for somebody who, as you get used to this, you would add load accordingly, but our goal is to try to get to where it is hard and we couldn't do 50 to 100 reps. It's not hard enough, okay? Okay, so again, I threw a lot of information at you guys, and I will tell you that Google is fantastic. There's a lot of information. There's lots of videos and things like that. So what I'm going to say here is that the first thing you want to do with all this little information, I've got to start doing some strength training. Okay, great. Decide when and how much time you can give every week. That would be the first question I would kind of ask yourself is, okay, when could I fit this in my life and how much time could I give it? I just gave you a range. I said 20 to 30 minutes. I said twice a week. So you have 7 days to work with, right? I would start with that first. Then the next thing I would say is you want to pick the most convenient place where you can be the most consistent. Okay, that is super important. Again, I'm going to pick on Jesse again here. So Jesse decided 2 years ago that he wanted to start exercising again, but he wanted to try to fit this in. He really could only give in his schedule at that time 2 days a week, about 30 minutes, and he was going to have a friend of ours kind of program for him. So he said, I'm going to do bare minimum, and I'm just going to be consistent with it. So he did that for probably 6 months, and then he said, this feels kind of good. I think I'm going to bump to 3 days a week. And this feels even better. I'm going to bump to 4 days a week. And he was kind of working out at home. And then he decided, you know what, this feels good. I feel better. So he decided probably 6-8 months ago, he kind of really took this on and he decided to program for himself, kind of put his stuff together. We have a home gym, which is awesome. So it's convenient. The only way for him to be the most consistent most consistent was for us to have something in our home. So he goes to work at 7:30 in the morning. So he gets up at 5, does his morning routine. Then he goes to the gym, out to our gym at 6, works out from 6 to 6:45, gets a shower and goes to work. And he's getting workouts in 4 days a week. That's working for him because when he comes home at night, he's toast. So my point with saying all of this is just kind of think, okay, when could I fit this in? How much time can I give it? And then pick, again, the most convenient place where you can be the most consistent, okay? And I put a bunch of pictures up here because, and I did a bunch of variations here because, again, there's a couple working out there with water bottles, right? They're at home. It's easy. They're not using any equipment. You have the lady at the gym with her dumbbells. You have the old guy with his kettlebells. You have resistance bands. This can look You can go to a gym somewhere. This can look many different ways. But just, again, make it simple for yourself on what can I do, what's going to be the most convenient for me where I can start to be consistent. Okay, so I put there's a handout that you guys got that has kind of some of this stuff in it, and I put 2 kind of like sample workout programs that anybody can do. And the first one was a home workout with no equipment, and it covers all the major muscle groups. So we have squats, we have push-ups, which you can do on your counter, you can do on the floor, you can do on the wall, so many variations. Dips on a chair for kind of pushing up, okay? Lunges. I put a sit-up in there. Sit-up's not always functional, but I will tell you that there are so many people that cannot get up off the floor. They cannot get out of bed without rolling, okay? So I would challenge you to say that, like, you probably want to work on your abs a little bit if you can't sit up out of bed, or you can't get up off the floor, okay? Bent over rows, deadlift with a household item or just with your body weight. Then you can take those same exercises I put over here with dumbbells or resistance bands. You can buy a set of resistance bands on Amazon or at Target. And you can do all these exercises with a little bit of weight, okay? And if you don't know what these exercises are, don't freak out. Like I said, just put it into Google and they'll show you a nice little video, or come talk to me after. I didn't put in programs for the gym, and the reason I didn't do that was because it can get really complicated. But I will tell you this, that if you decide to go to a gym, most gyms, as part of their initiation, if you say, hey, I want to start an exercise program, we'll set you up with a trainer, and they'll have someone go through all the equipment with you so you can see how everything works. So that's an option. And then the other idea is that you can always join a gym where there's more group fitness and they have programs that are already kind of going on. So there's just, again, depending on how much you want to spend and how much time you want to spend, there's a whole spectrum. But again, I would just think about what would work best for me, okay? Okay, this is going to come up. Flexibility. Everybody's like, should I be doing flexibility exercises? And I'm going to say, is it important? I'm going to say it depends, okay? So if you're the person that can't tie your shoes, or you have a hard time getting to the floor to pick something up, then I would say flexibility might be an issue, and you may want to spend a little time doing some accessory work. But I will also say this. What we're trying to do with our strength exercises is we are trying to move through full range of motion. So when you're doing a squat, you're trying to go through whatever amount of motion you have, or a deadlift. And so just by doing these movements, you're doing range of motion and more flexibility at the same time. So if you're a yoga person, you love stretching and it helps your mental sanity, lovely, great. But you don't need to be, there's not a lot of research on you need to be flexible and it increases your longevity. Not the same story, okay? We can get flexibility with our programs and with moving through a lot of these things I've already talked about. So again, yes, full range of motion is optimal. And if you have an issue where, you don't have that, you can work towards that. Or if you just have a limitation, you do as much as you possibly can. Or again, if you have a sport that you need something, great. But you don't necessarily need to find extra time, unless you want to just spend time working on flexibility. Okay, so that brings me to our next phase. So we have strengthening, super important. We need to be doing it a little bit. Then we have cardiovascular fitness. So this is getting our heart rate up and breathing hard, sweating, and increasing blood flow, okay? So American Heart Association says, kind of like I said earlier, 150 minutes of moderate exercise or 75 minutes of vigorous exercise throughout the week, or any combination of both. So this sounds overwhelming, and I'm going to kind of simplify this for you guys a little bit coming up here. So as a society, like I said in the beginning, we do not move as much as we used to. So average American walks 3,000 to 4,000 steps a day, which is only 1.5 to 2 miles a day. And I would say that this is just because of the societal kind of just things are convenient. Someone like my husband, again, he walks probably 3,000 steps a day or less in his little office. I probably walk 10 to 12,000 steps a day. So take this kind of as a scale of, okay, if you're a mover, someone who is always moving, you're probably already you're more fit, you're moving around, and you don't need to spend extra time getting steps in. But if you're somebody who really doesn't move a lot, I would simplify this whole idea of working out, getting my heart rate up really high. Don't worry about that. Simply try to walk 10,000 steps a day or more. That's going to put you in a much healthier category, and it's just simpler versus thinking about get your heart at a certain level, stay there for so long. That's all great, but if we just can kind of simplify that and say we as a society need to be walking and moving more, try to get more steps in. Park far away, walk to the grocery store, go to the park with the kids and don't take the car, things like that. Yes, you can do bike, elliptical. If you have knee problems and you can't walk, then absolutely get on a bike, get in a pool, get on an elliptical. That all counts. Again, aiming towards that 150 minutes, which essentially is 30 minutes 5 times a week or something like that. Also very good. I'm going to get on my soapbox again one more time and talk about women here and athletes. So if you are in that perimenopause, again, 35 to 45, or menopause after you're done having a period, you're in the older stages of life, and you're very active, and you're struggling with how your body looks, you don't feel like you can drop your weight, you just feel like your body's not what it used to be, there's some things you want to do differently than what I just talked about with the kind of move your body kind of thing. You want to kind of, in order to make yourself a little bit more, improve your body composition and get a little bit more specific with how you feel, you want to first try to stay away from things like Orange Theory and the pink weights, okay? Because it puts this category of women in kind of this, well, I'm going to say this dead man zone, okay? Where you're not working hard enough, high enough to really make a change, and you're not working low enough to basically decrease your cortisol. Okay, so this is a special group of people that you really at this stage of life want to be, especially again, more in this perimenopause, 35 to 45, where your hormones are doing this. You really want to stay low in this conversational pace when you're doing cardio, because that does decrease cortisol, okay? If you go in that, again, moderate zone, your body senses that stress and it just adds to more stress, and it just helps, again, with not that body recomposition. If you're a trained athlete and you're somebody who works out a lot and you're like, man, I want to do more cardio because it's going to help me lose body fat, and it's not working, it's because, again, you're in this dead zone of it's not really making the change. So you either want to go low and slow and do more strength training, or again, if you're somebody who's been exercising for a long time, you can do what's called SIT, which is basically short interval training at a very high intensity. So you're going 9 out of 10 on an RPE scale, basically as hard as you can possibly go for 10 to 15 seconds, and then you're recovering for 2 to 3 minutes, and you're doing that maybe 3 to 5 times, and you're done. And that stimulates basically really good things for helping kind of your body use, get stronger and then burn fat and then kind of comp a little bit. If you're also a higher level athlete, then again, you're going to be looking for things where you might be training in those higher zones for longer periods of time. But again, that's going to be kind of more specific. If you're just your general person who just wants to move more and get healthier, then focus on the steps, okay? All right, so kind of pulling this all together. So how do I make this happen? So again, I talked about in the beginning, thinking about when you can do this and how much time you can give. But the next question would be, okay, cost is going to be a thing, right? So the easiest thing to do is going to be to start tomorrow with your body weight, right? So that's the easiest place to start. If you have weights at home, or you have bands, or you have household items, you can take my little exercise program and you can do that tomorrow, no cost, easy peasy. If you're like, not going to do that, I want to go somewhere, guess what? We have Planet Fitness, and it's $15 a month, and they have tons of machines, and it's a great place to start, super cheap, and it gets you out of the house. So that's an option. And then if you really go, I really want to get into this, then there's many options with regards to the Ridge. We have the Hot Springs. We have gyms like CrossFit Bozeman, Altitude Athletics, Dialed Fitness. These are all established gyms in town that have programs that you can, or they have monthly programs. You can kind of just go, do the workout, do your thing. Or you can kind of start building stuff up at home, dumbbells, kettlebells, things like that. So again, just think of where you are and what you can start doing, and then see how you can implement it. Okay, so quickly, everything that what gets measured gets improved. So I'm just going to talk about this briefly because I think, again, going back to the steps, people go, how do I track steps? Your cell phone tracks steps most of the time. So you can look at your steps on your cell phone. That's easy peasy. If you have an iWatch, a lot of times that tracks steps. You can go as expensive as, Whoop or a Ring. Those things are kind of items you would wear that gives you sleep, that gives you what your heart rate is, that tells you your steps for the day, all those kinds of things. You can go on, Amazon and get basically a little fit tracker for $22 that tells you a lot of those similar things and steps. So might suggest that if you just want to know where you're at, and if you are trying to get healthier, where are you and what can you do to get more steps in? And just real briefly, if you are doing more strength training, you may want to consider a little bit more protein in your diet. So general recommendation is 0.7 to 1 gram of protein per pound of ideal body weight. So that is not the weight that you're maybe currently at. If you're like, okay, well, I'll use me for example. I'm 160 pounds. I would love to be 150 pounds. So I try to get 150 grams of protein in. So that's going to help your muscles recover and help you build muscle better. The other one that I would mention is creatine. So creatine's another kind of supplement you can kind of take that is a natural source of kind of energy, and it helps our muscles kind of repair and grow, and it keeps our cells hydrated so that we can basically our muscles can kind of get bigger and can do better essentially. And one of the cool things that's been really researched is brain function. So especially in women, it can help with cognition, the brain fog stuff. So there's been a lot of really cool research on women in particular that creatine can be really helpful from a mental side too. So 3 to 5 grams kind of per day there. Okay. Getting close to the end here, possible barriers. So obviously the first thing is pain. I have pain, I can't do these exercises, or I can't exercise. And I would say to you that I would ask your doctor, hey, can I go see somebody? Can I figure out why I'm having this pain? Can I see if I can navigate? There are so many things you can do when you have pain in an area. We can help you figure out how to exercise in a way that feels good. And I would probably also say that as you start moving more and get stronger, your pain will get better. So something to consider there. I have a health condition that maybe I don't know if I can exercise. I'm not sure if it's safe. Ask your doctor. Say, hey, could I start exercising? Could you send me to somebody that might help me start exercising to figure these things out? Then if you're scared and you have a lack of knowledge, these are things that again, seems kind of intimidating, but once you start moving, there are so many resources out there. If you're scared, you don't have a lack of, and you have a lack of knowledge, again, Google's amazing. There's a lot of programs online that you can follow that are going to help make this a lot easier. And again, come find me, come talk to, again, if you go to any gym, they'll a lot of times give you a nice kind of introduction into their equipment. Time. Talked about this in the beginning. You can't really get it back, and if you invest in your health and well-being, you're going to get more time on the other end, which is awesome. So not a good enough excuse. Okay, so putting it all together. So wrapping up, big thing is strength training, 2 days a week at least, with again those kind of compound multi-jointed movements with some accessory exercises. The second is I put this in here in the sense of you do want to try to make those movements as full range of motion as you can, so that you can, again, improve whatever desired goal you might have, like the grandpa with the granddaughter. Goal of getting 10,000 steps in a day or 150 minutes of cardiovascular exercise in per week, and then aiming for that 1 gram of protein per pound of ideal body weight on the nutritional side of things. So that's it. Any questions? Yes. So if you go to the gym or whatever you
Yep.
do, and you start getting a routine,
Yep.
how important is it to start switching things up?
Oh, I love that question. It depends, but I would say that generally speaking, let's say that you go to the gym, I would say give yourself at least, on the short end, 6 weeks. On the long end, I would say could be upwards of 10 to 12 weeks, depending on how you're feeling. And what you're looking for there is, I do think we use the world in the world of exercise periodization, where we're going, okay, We're trying to get, let's say we're just trying to get fitter. We want to get stronger. So maybe we go through a strength training program for 8 weeks. Then it's kind of a good idea to kind of like take a recovery week or so where you're just kind of moving around, taking a rest time. And then maybe you start back again with either different exercises or the same exercises with a little bit more weight, and then you phase back up again. So it really depends on, I would say, kind of your goal. Again, if you're looking at just kind of total body overall strength, I think you can kind of stick with similar exercises, but you could play with working with dumbbells versus working with a bar, things like that, and do variations there. But I do think it is important to, if you've been doing the exact same exercises for 6 months, sometimes it is nice to kind of shake it up. But in the beginning, I would say anywhere from that, 6 weeks to 12 weeks of doing essentially the same thing, then evaluate, how do you feel? Are these getting easy? Are you enjoying this? But you want to work on, like, I'm doing like a deadlift cycle right now. I'm working on lifting, from the floor. So depending on what your goals are, or you're going into ski season and you're like, hey, I want to get my legs stronger for ski season. So I'm going to start in the summer or fall working towards getting stronger for ski season. So you can kind of, think about it a bunch of different ways. Did that answer your question? Yeah. Okay, cool. Yes.
So if you are sick,
yes.
do you continue as strong, or do you take a break, go back?
You take a break, yeah. So if you're sick, and I would say you're not feeling well, it depends. I would say it sometimes depends too, but for the most part, it's not really a good idea to push yourself when you're not feeling well. Some people say, oh, I feel like if I sweat, I'll feel better. But I think there's something about get out, go for a walk, versus maybe go to the gym and lift weights. Yeah, I would wait until you're feeling well enough to really, again, adequately push yourself to fatigue. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes. Yes. Yeah, for sure. So I would say, again, I'll just kind of use me as reference. So I would say that if I look back over my life and when I felt the healthiest, I was about 155 pounds. And so in my head, I'm like, okay, like I got up to 165, and I'm like, okay, I think if I can drop down to kind of like, I try to get 150 to 155, something like that. So I think if you can kind of look back at like, okay, when may I have felt good? Or again, I could give a guess of I probably would feel good 20 pounds lighter, 30 pounds lighter. I don't know. Do you have any other suggestions on how to figure out ideal weight? Jesse's going to give an ideal weight chart tomorrow. Yes. So so he's going to talk about tomorrow about protein and all the nutritional pieces of that too. Yeah, so that's a great question. Yes. No, good. Bring it on. Yes. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Yep. That's right. Let me clarify for you. So elliptical would not be weight bearing because it's kind of gliding for you, right? So ideally what we're looking for is there's kind of two components. So weight bearing would be load bearing. We want ground impact where we're getting the ground reaction forces of the floor kind of coming up into our bone, okay? So ideally jumping, running, wearing a weighted vest while walking, things like that. I would also say that people go, well, I have bad knees, I can't do that. You can even just change the way you move. So back to my endurance guy who had osteoporosis climbing mountains, and he's crazy fit. For him, we're going to change the direction of how his muscles are working. So his hips are weak. So we're going to do more lateral impact movements, more rotational impact movements, because that's going to stimulate his bone differently than running in a straight line. So think of it in like not just, like axial loading, like that is, again, that would be the first thing I would say is like landing, hard landing, or ground impact with weight, with or without weight. And then maybe again that changing the direction. And I would also say like the trampolines that rebound, unfortunately no, because they're rebounding you. Like you're not getting, you want that kind of hard ground reaction. Is that helpful? Yeah. Okay, cool. Any other questions? You can hit me up after too. Cool. All right. Well, we can take a 5-minute break and then Jesse will get ready for sleep. Okay.
We've got our bathroom break, a drink of water. Let's go ahead and come back in. And come back in, but don't sit down. We're going to do the same thing we did yesterday. So let's everyone stand up for just a minute, because it's a health seminar, well, of course. So we're going to do the same two things, one big stretch, and then that physiological sigh, especially because we're talking about sleep next, right? So this is sometimes what we do in sleep. For those who weren't here, the physiological sigh is a nice deep breath in, within a quick extra breath in, and then a nice slow breath out. That sounds kind of like this. Okay, and then real quick, arms nice and slow, all the way up. Crack the back a little. Oh, good. Okay. All right. We can go ahead and have a seat and we'll get going. Real quick before I start, I did not realize I was going to get thrown under the bus quite like that when Shelli was talking, but I do want to share a little. A few years ago was a pretty rough spot for me in my life. As she talked about, I would get hurt doing anything. This was a lot to do with my work because I spent my entire life like bent over and hunched in like one position. And I would literally like turn the light on and like, oh, my back. And I mean like pain that I couldn't like get up. I would be like, I'm sure multiple people have had pain like that, but it would happen all the time. Pick up a kid, move something. It was terrible. It got to the point where at work, I still remember a couple of these days, and it didn't happen for long because it was very motivating, but I would have to leave patients, go to my office, and cry. And I was like weeping, grown man sitting in his office with the door shut, just bawling, and then pull myself together and go back out and see the patient because the pain in my back and neck was so bad. And like she talked about kind of getting strong in these big range of motions, I went to a PT, not her, because you shouldn't go to your wife and husband, right? So she referred me to a really great other PT. And I was really blown away because what that PT did was she's like, okay, so you're in this super unhealthy, sucky position. Okay, that's rough, but here's what we're going to do. We're going to get you strong in like this position. And doing like neck exercises and all these types of things. And it did not take long for that pain to start to improve. And actually, like Shelli said, a lot of what I do now is like I actually have like a neck worker-outer thing that I do to help my neck. I actually use a device that a lot of MMA fighters and wrestlers use to get their neck really strong. Or if you're a dentist, you can use it because we do that too. But it definitely, getting stronger changes things. And I didn't change my diet. I didn't get any extra sleep. I slept better because I wasn't in as much pain. I was all the other things we're talking about. I was literally just getting stronger, and that really started to change things in my life because now I wasn't hurting all the time. I could move better. I actually don't think it affected my patients because I would like tough it out if I'm doing my job. It was just so much more enjoyable after the fact. And I think she already told you that sort of led into starting with 2 days a week. So if you think, now this goes from, I'm no longer doing just PT, now I'm doing sort of general fitness. But when I started, if you think that 2 20-minute sessions a week isn't going to make a difference, I can tell you that you're wrong and that it does. And if you're doing right stuff, and we're talking about actually, like lifting heavy weights, doing compound movements, but it doesn't take, you don't have to be in the gym an hour and a half a day every day of the week. That's not what it takes. And those sort of things, as you start feeling better, they do snowball and you start enjoying it more. And as she said, it's changed a lot about my life, and I do it more now. And about a month ago, this was super weird. My wife has always been this person when she gets stressed, she's like, I just need to exercise. And I'm like, no, when I get stressed, I just want to like take a nap, like chill out, sleep. And about a month ago, we were having a little squabble over something, and I could tell I was getting irritated. And I was like, I just need to go exercise. And I remember this like thinking, that's a weird thing to come out of my mouth. And I went and did it, and I could just tell everything just calmed right down and felt so much better. And for me and this is something this is part of my personal journey, but for me to be able to get stressed, and have an automatic reaction of, not that I want to take a nap, but that I want to go move and do something, like that was huge. It was so powerful to me to realize, like, I didn't think through it. It's just what my body wanted to do. So we talked last night about how pick some of these things, take the low-hanging fruit, take what you can start with, take what's easiest, and start there, and get a little victory. And then build from that, and then build from that. And it will come if you stick with, if you're consistent, these things are going to come, because that's just how our bodies were designed, and it's awesome. So it doesn't have to start big, it can start really simple and easy. And I'll tell you one quick other story. If you're nervous about starting something, about working out, about going to a gym, let me tell you something real quick. If you go to a gym and you look like you don't belong, you are going to be blown away by how welcomed you'll be. Because I've been in those gyms, I've been to CrossFit gyms and other gyms, and when someone comes in, when we get a little old lady, and they come to CrossFit gyms sometimes, or we get a guy who you can tell just is not sure what's going on, dude, people are going to surround, and people who look intimidating, they're going to be so excited to help you on your journey. So don't be afraid to start that journey, and it can be really scary. I can totally empathize with that. But I just want to tell you, if you get through those doors, especially if it's a place that Shelli talked about where they have kind of, some group classes and group strength, you're going to be really blown away by how much support you'll get on that journey. So, okay, that said, let's talk a little about sleep. So, here's an interesting question, which we all know the answer to because we're here to help someone, but does sleep matter? One of the first things that most of us will cut when times get tough is sleep. We're going to go, I got to stay up and study later. I need to pull an all-nighter. We don't study because most of us aren't in school anymore, but I got to wrap kids' presents after they go to bed. I need to do some extra thing for my job. So we're real quick to go, you know what I could probably sacrifice is my sleep. And it's not that big a deal because I can suck it up and I'll do better the next day. But as we're going to learn here, sleep is crucial. And in my personal opinion, I just told you how getting a little stronger helped me sleep better. But I can tell you since then it's changed and I prioritize sleep way more than I used to. And I am a habitual poor sleeper. I come from a family of poor sleepers. I have multiple family members who've been on sleeping medication for like decades. And I have had a lot of sleepless nights. And actually, after this stuff with the PT, so this was maybe a year and a half coming up on 2 years ago, I got to a point where I was like, if I'm going to go any further with improving my health, I have to start getting better sleep. So I'll tell you a little more about some of the things that I started to do then, but I decided like this has got to be a big priority change for me. And it has been, and I can tell you that the sleep quantity and quality that I get now compared to what I got before, it doesn't even compare. It's so much better, and I now consider myself a pretty good sleeper, and I wake up and I feel rested, and it's like a whole new world compared to what my majority of my adult life up until about 2 years ago was. So sleep is super, super crucial, and we're going to start to talk through this a little bit. So why do we need sleep? So what do we need for growth? This is a good question for any type of thing, right? Emotional growth, mental growth, like learning new things, physical growth, building our muscles. What we need for growth of all types is, and Shelli just talked about this, you have to have a stressor. You have to have something that makes that's a challenge, right? Stresses your muscle, stresses our brains, stresses our emotions. Hopefully not too much, like we talked with Emily last night. So you've got to have a stressor, but then you've got to have recovery. And the recovery is the part that oftentimes, it can be both. You can have someone that just doesn't have enough stressing in their life. They're not working their muscles enough. They're not pushing themselves hard enough at work. But you can have just the opposite. You can have the person that goes really hard at work, that is giving themselves completely to other people and never takes a moment for themselves, is studying all the time and just doesn't want to sleep. And if you miss out on the recovery side of it, it's equally as unproductive. So sleep is when we get the bulk of that recovery. We get a little bit during the day, but the vast majority of our recovery comes at nighttime when we sleep. So let's talk through a couple areas in which sleep is pretty important. Cognitive function, super important here. So when we go through the day, we're learning new things and we're experiencing new things. Our brain has all these little fragments of memories that happen throughout the day, and they kind of just float around in our head a little bit, and then when we sleep, our brain consolidates that, and it's like putting books back on the shelf. And it allows us to consolidate our memories. It almost helps our brain have a roadmap to where these little memories are, so that down the road, when we are like, oh, I need to remember this thing that I learned in a book. Or a little kid may do something mean to one of their friends, and they see that they hurt their friend's feelings, and they feel something inside, and they go, oh, I don't want to do that again. And they have to learn that this behavior hurt their friend, and their brain has to process that, has to put it away, so the next time they're in that situation, they remember not to do that. That kind of stuff happens while we sleep. Creativity and problem solving. For this presentation, I've had multiple times where I've woken up in the middle of the night and be like, oh, this thing would be good. And you sit down and you write it down and you go back to sleep. There's lots of people with lots of stories of sort of world-changing ideas that came to them during their sleep. I had a mentor once tell me, he's like, you always sleep with a pad of paper by your bed, because if you go to bed thinking about a problem, you're going to wake up with the answer. And if you don't have something to write it down, it's just going to drive you nuts, and then you'll forget about it. So we figure out a lot of complex problems while we're sleeping. How cool is that? We don't have to put effort into it. We just have to sleep. But we do have to sleep. Decision-making and critical thinking. We have a saying, right? If we have a big decision that's coming up, we'll be like, okay, I'm going to take the night and what? Sleep on it, right? We all know we're going to think about it a little more clearly in the morning. We're going to be able to get our thoughts together. We're going to be able to have a better picture of what decision we want to make. And along the lines of decision-making and critical thinking, if we don't get sleep, we can't think as clearly. And if that is chronic, if that happens long-term, it has some really detrimental effects. Long-term sleep deprivation, even if it's as little as 1 to 2 hours a night, has really, really profoundly damaging effects to our health. Specifically, this little thing we're talking about, higher risk for neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and dementia, but basically not being able to think as clearly, right? What about our physical health? Super important here too. So, as little as cutting 1 hour of sleep consistently over long term has negative lifespan effects. We don't live quite as long. If we get better sleep, we're not going to get sick as much. Again, we know, our bodies know this. By the way, if you ever watch a little kid who gets sick, what do they want to do? They want to sleep. You watch a dog that gets sick. What's he going to do? He's going to go and he's just going to lay in a corner. He's going to eat some grass and throw up. Empty his stomach, yeah. Then he's going to go lay down and he's going to sleep it off. And what do we do as adults? We don't rest. We don't sleep. We're like, no, I got to get the thing done and do it, and we just make it worse on ourselves. But immune function is a super impacted part of sleep. Increased insulin sensitivity. As we get less sleep, our bodies do not respond to insulin as well. So folks who are dealing with type 2 diabetes or who are pre-diabetic, getting sleep is a great way to start to improve your insulin sensitivity and help your body function better, doing nothing else different. Not exercising, not eating differently, just getting better sleep can help with that. Those other things are super helpful too, but this is a big one. So before we get into this, I'll tell you an interesting study. They took a group of people and they put them on a diet plan. And then they took half of that group and they cut out 2 hours of sleep. And the effects were so profound that they lost no weight at all. It makes a big deal. There's another part of that study I'll tell you about in a minute. But we have hormones that regulate how much we want to eat, when to stop eating, when to start eating, and the types of food that we crave. And as we get lower amounts of sleep, we crave higher calorie, more sort of higher calorie food. We tend to eat more. We don't get the signals that tell us when to stop eating quite as much. So it's easier to overeat. And it's easier to eat super high calorie foods, which also make it easier to overeat. Cardiovascular health. If you watch the little video I sent out, I think I mentioned a study where the day after daylight savings, we see about 25% higher cardiac events in hospitals. And then on the flip side, when we get that extra hour of sleep on whatever the fall one is called, fall back, we see another, like a 20, it's not quite as high, but about a 20% decrease in cardiac events. High blood pressure, stroke, diabetes, and then again, our body's ability to regulate stress hormones, like cortisol, those all go down as we get less sleep. Another one, increases libido. This seems to have a more profound effect in women. It doesn't seem to affect men quite that much. They can be sleep deprived and it's still fine. But to the tune of almost as effective, if a woman loses 1 hour of sleep, it cuts her desire to be with her partner by about 15%. So it's not nothing. So men, help do the dishes and get your wife to bed. I'm just helping you out here. Mental health and emotional regulation. I think we all sort of intuitively know that this is there, but again, as adults, so much of adulting is learning to shut off the things that our body feels and just like power through, right? But before I even go to the next part, who is the population that you see sleep, lack of sleep, just turn them into monsters? Teenagers, kids. I was like, man, a toddler, you get that thing into the witching hour and they just lose their mind. Adults do too. We just have learned to sort of manage it slightly better. Mood regulation, really important for sleep. Without sleep, actually, Shelli and I were just kind of joking about this. We've both sort of felt this as we were sort of prepping for this. Our sleep hasn't been quite as good, and we can both tell, like, we're a little shorter with the kids, we're a little shorter with each other. Our ability to maintain sort of our household happiness has been somewhat compromised, which isn't y'all's fault, that's our fault, but it definitely, it happens for the best of us. The amount we react to stressful situations is all affected by the amount of sleep we get. So there are quite a few different types of sleep that we go through in the night, but I'm going to talk about just two basic categories. We have what's called REM sleep, R-E-M, and then we have deep sleep. This is an overgeneralization, but generally REM sleep is when we go through our emotional and cognitive healing, and then deep sleep is more of our physical healing time. That's not 100% accurate, but it's close enough for our purposes today. So REM sleep and dreaming, super important for our body's ability to make sense of some of the complex emotions we feel throughout the day. We don't have to remember our dreams. We don't even have to know why we dream, but we do know that that's an important part of sleep and that that is when our body sort of processes these complex emotions that we deal with throughout the day. We also know that some of these emotions, and folks who have been through trying and rough, challenging relational things where you feel emotions that you just don't want to feel ever again, your body also doesn't want you to do that. And so sometimes our body actually has to choose to sort of get rid of some of these things a little bit. We obviously, again, anyone who's been through it, you know you don't completely forget it. But you do know that it doesn't feel quite as profoundly terrible the next morning when you wake up. So some of that housekeeping of getting some of that really rough stuff out, that happens at night when we sleep. Mental health disorders. So I can't stress this enough, but chronic lack of sleep is a precursor to almost every mental health issue. This was something that Emily, we were chatting about, and she was like, oh, I hope you're going to like mention that. I'm like, oh, don't worry, we definitely will. But she wanted to say that same thing, that getting good sleep is so important for helping us stay away from a lot of the mental health disorders that are out there. No shame by any means if that happens, but not getting good sleep is a big, big contributing factor to a lot of mental health issues. Cleaning and repair processes. So we have a lot of buildup. We call them toxins. That's kind of a nice word for all the junk that our body builds up through the day. Our body gets rid of that at night in a lot of ways. Our lymphatic system, things are sort of flushing out. Our brain goes through that same process. We have something called the glymphatic system, which is in our brain. It's basically the lymphatic system in the brain. But there's, again, this buildup of toxins that happen just byproducts of life as we go through the day, and our brain uses that time to clear those things out. And then, of course, muscle repair, cellular repair. So when we undergo physical damage, and that could be a cut on our wrist, a broken bone. It could be straining our muscle as we work out, and we get little tears in the muscle, and then our muscle rebuilds. This all happens at night. And interestingly, if anyone's ever, I'm sure we've all seen photos of Arnold Schwarzenegger or any sort of giant, massive bodybuilder who's on steroids and he's these huge muscles. One of the things that we might think that they're just like doing nothing but working out all day and just working out like crazy all the time. But actually, what they do is basically three things. They eat, they work out, and then they rest and they sleep, and they take lots of naps, and they just rest. I mean, this is people who it's their job, right? Their job is to get as big and giant and strong as they can. But they know how profound the effect of sleep is on building their muscles. So they tear it down, they rebuild it, and they're taking naps, multiple naps a day, and they're getting lots and lots of sleep. So none of us can do that, but it is important to know that if you're going to work out like Shelli talked about, A, it's going to help you get better sleep, and B, sleep is required to maximize, like you just went and put effort in at the gym. You just went and hurt yourself, right? You suffered. You might as well get the benefit of that. And if you don't get your sleep, you're going to get a significantly lower benefit from the pain and suffering of working out. Did I make working out sound really good with all that pain and suffering? If anyone in this room, and statistically, I guarantee there's multiple people in this room who struggle with sleep, just know you're not alone. It is a global crisis. On average, so when you see 1 to 2 hours less a night, we're all probably going like, oh, it's like not that big a deal, right? But we just talked about how profound even an hour, certainly 2, is, especially long term. And on average, we sleep as humans 1 to 2 hours less per night than we did about 100 years ago. So sleep was probably, in fact, I can tell you for sure, because we're going to talk about some of the medical diagnoses in sleep in a minute. I mean, this is a new problem. And because it's a new problem, it's also a new area of medicine. The way that we fix it is relatively new. We don't have anywhere near the amount and sort of size of studies that we have on things like diabetes and weight loss and muscle training, and these are things that we've known about for hundreds of years. Sleep wasn't a thing, so this is a new issue, unfortunately. 3 out of 4 Americans have some sleep disorder symptom, and that doesn't mean you have a sleep disorder, but when we look at all of the things that are part of sleep disorder, but it could be just not getting enough rest. But if you start looking at it and you're like, oh, I have that, and like, I have that. But again, normal American adult life, you work past it, you just power through, right? When we look at those lists of symptoms, which we're not going to do today because it's quite extensive, it's almost all of us, about 3 out of 4 people have something on that list. So sleep is non-negotiable. I mean, it's negotiable, but it's it's a big compromise, and it's going to affect your health profoundly. So I would say it's non-negotiable. And unlike some other things so let's take exercise, for example. A few years ago, I was not exercising. My muscles shrank. They got a lot weaker. Thankfully, I was able to start to work with some PTs, start a workout program, and I was able to build my muscles back up. Maybe not as big as if I'd have been doing it my whole life, but you can kind of come back from some of the damage that happens from not training. We can build muscle at any time in life. Unlike that, sleep has, what's the word I'm looking for? It accumulates. That's not the right word. There's another one. That's the one on the slide. But anyway, it builds up over time. And that doesn't mean that we can't catch up on our sleep in the sense of like, I get a good night's sleep and now I feel better. That does happen, but the damage that comes from chronic sleep deprivation, the damage to our body's repair system, to our brains, to our emotions, unfortunately, those don't go away. Starting to get good sleep is a great way to go about it, and we can do a lot of improvement. But the sooner we start that, the better. So just don't think you can catch up on sleep another time. It makes a big deal to start getting it soon.
Are you saying that you can like never expect or
There are some that, yeah. So for example, poor sleep we just talked about how there's a lot of other illnesses that come along with poor sleep. Once you have some of those illnesses, just getting more sleep doesn't get better. So the effects of chronic sleep deprivation often have lasting consequences. It does mean that when we start getting good sleep, some of the sort of short-term effects, the short-term healing, all that can get better, but there can be really lasting and profound things that we just can't always get back. Okay, let's talk a little about, a little on the medical side, and I want to be very clear, there are a lot of medical conditions that affect sleep and that are part of sleep medicine. I'm not going to go into all of those. I'm going to talk about the two most common ones and one that I happen to deal with on a pretty daily basis with patients. So the first one is insomnia. This is just trouble falling asleep or trouble staying asleep. If you have insomnia or some level of insomnia, we're going to go over some really helpful and practical tips to get better sleep. Those can be helpful for insomnia patients. And if those aren't helpful, then by all means, please talk to your doctor. In fact, I'll say this a couple of times. If you're not getting good sleep and the stuff we're talking about here doesn't help you, please talk to your doctor. It's super, super important. It just makes everything better, right? You're going to hear through all these nights how these all play on each other, right? Let's go back to Emily's thing. If you're stressed out from a family relationship, you're going to get poor sleep. If you get poor sleep, you're going to overeat, and you're going to be less likely to work out. And if you do that, you're going to feel more stress, and you're going to feel guilt, and you're going to feel shame, and then you're going to not sleep again. And so all of these areas play on each other. But to me personally, and I could be biased because I was such a poor sleeper, and I know what it feels like now to be a better sleeper, and because I deal with it with patients. But I tell most people, if I'm talking to them in the chair and we're having a conversation on lifestyle changes, I think the first thing to start with is trying to get good sleep if you can, because it's going to make eating healthy so much easier. It's going to make deciding to go for a walk in the afternoon so much easier. It's going to make not fighting with your spouse, not being, short with your kids, so much easier. That doesn't mean you can't start other places, but I think there are so many benefits that come from that. So to that point, please talk to your doctor if you're not getting good sleep and if the stuff we're going to cover here tonight isn't helpful for you. So that's insomnia a little bit. Sleep apnea. This is a really relatively new issue that we're dealing with. And a lot of this is coming from, there's a couple things, but two things are added adipose tissue, extra weight that we carry. And as many people have probably heard, this is getting more and more profound in Americans as time goes on. So that's contributing. The other thing is the shrinking of what's called our midface, which is this area right here. One of the things that I don't have any slide on this, but I'll just sort of briefly go into it. One of the things that we know when we study more primitive cultures, so cultures that don't have Western foods, and there are very few of these left anymore, but some certain cultures in Africa, some tribal areas where they don't have a lot of Western influence, they have room for their third molars. They have room for that teeth that half of us have probably had removed. They have room for it. The midface right here is significantly more developed. It sort of sticks out a little bit more. They have a lot more airway volume, which is something we're going to talk about in a minute. So as we don't know exactly why, although we have some ideas, but we do know as you introduce processed Western foods, we see a significant increase in the midface not developing over time and teeth getting more and more crowded, and we have less and less volume for our tongue. Our tongue does not seem to shrink like our midface does, and so that tongue gets pushed down and back, helps close off our airway, and we're starting to get more and more sleep apnea. Sleep apnea was only first even observed in like the 60s in a hospital setting, and we had no treatments for it till like the 80s or something. So this is really pretty new, and we do have some treatment that's very effective. It's not nearly as sophisticated a treatment as we have for some other stuff. So for like a common one is a CPAP, which is like, hey, we're going to hook you up to a reverse vacuum cleaner and just force air down your lungs. It's kind of it's a little, like you're kind of hitting it with the bat, but it does work. So I say all that to say this is a newer area. If you haven't heard of it or you're not familiar with what to do, this is another great thing that you can talk to your doctor about. If your dentist is trained in sleep medicine, you can talk to your dentist. But we're going to go through some things here tonight. I didn't even go. What is sleep apnea? So sleep apnea is essentially a blockage that happens when you're trying to breathe, and you essentially stop breathing, which is where the word apnea or apneic comes from. And it is fairly common, and it's getting considerably more common. But it has really profound effects on sleep. One of the worst is that many people who have sleep apnea don't know they have it. And they live a lot of their life thinking that like, oh, this is just normal. I just do my thing. I got a night's sleep. I felt like I went to sleep. But they're not getting good quality sleep. And not getting good quality sleep is actually worse than getting a short amount of good quality sleep. And it's also more dangerous because you don't know. Like, you know if you pulled an all-nighter and you didn't sleep. But you don't necessarily know if you get what you think is good sleep, but you just don't feel as rested in the morning. And sleep apnea leads to that. So, all right. So we just talked about how it's becoming more common. Roughly 6 million people are diagnosed in the US, and out of 350, that doesn't sound like a whole lot. But I'm curious, and this is obviously an estimate because we can only go based on diagnoses, but how many people do you think that we estimate have sleep apnea? 1 out of 8. Let's see if that's the right, wait a second, 50, yes. That would be, yeah, good call. About 40 million, which is about 15% of the population, which I think, I'm not a math guy, but is that about 1 out of 8? Jeremy, good call. So it's a lot. And that, by the way, is only sort of what we now consider to be sleep apnea. There's a whole nother area, I think I put it in here somewhere. There's different levels of sleep apnea, kind of mild, moderate, severe. We're just starting to learn in the last 5 to 10 years, there's a whole nother category called upper airway resistance syndrome. So if someone's breathing and they occlude, they stop breathing completely, that's apnea. But if that airway is sort of letting some air through but not enough, it's highly resistant to air getting through. So that's what they're calling this airway resistance syndrome. And we're finding this in like 25-year-old, 100-pound marathon running females, right? Not the classic person we think of with sleep apnea. And we're finding that these lower levels of sleep apnea that aren't even true sleep apnea by the diagnostic standard, that those can be just as damaging because they go on for a long time and they're even harder to catch because that person is, not having the same type of effects. Like some people, if you're waking up someone snoring 2 rooms over, you have a way better chance of being diagnosed because that person's going to be like, bro, please go get checked. I need some sleep. Or like kick you out of the bedroom, right? That's actually like a good thing. When a spouse kicks a partner out of the bedroom for snoring, that's actually one of like the big motivating factors for that person to go get checked. If it's a guy, it doesn't seem to be as motivating for a girl, but. Okay, so let's talk a little bit. This is what I see on a daily basis. So a lot, sometimes multiple times a day. So I'll talk you through some of the things that we see, some of the evidence from the oral cavity and from the face. One of the first things is low airway volume. So see if that little thing works. Okay, so up here you can see this guy. So what we're doing is we're taking a 3-dimensional X-ray, and then we're taking a slice that comes right down the middle, and we're looking at it from the side. And we can look at and measure the volume. This would be basically like his throat hole, for a really simple term, right? It's how big the opening is back there. We want a bigger throat hole, okay? The bigger the hole, the easier it is to breathe. It's not super complicated, right? And as you look at the person on the bottom, you can see that their tongue is taking up more space and it's closing up some of that space towards the back of the throat. As that gets closer and closer to being closed off, there's just less volume. By the way, I want to be clear, the things we're going over, none of these are a diagnosis of sleep apnea. These are all just risk factors for it and things that we look for. But tooth pain. It's very common to see tooth issues from sleep apnea because our body, I'll go into this in a minute, it turns out our body doesn't like dying from lack of oxygen. So it really will do anything it can to try and get more oxygen. And one of those things are different patterns of grinding and clenching where we're trying to posture our jaw in a way to get more air. Cracked teeth, worn down teeth, mouth breathing, And this is something that is a lot of people don't think of, but if you can't breathe well through your nose, you're going to breathe through your mouth because, again, your body needs oxygen. It's better to breathe through your mouth than not at all, but we'd rather it be through your nose. And if you breathe through your mouth, you're just going to have a higher risk of sleep apnea. Loose teeth, like wiggly teeth, and that can come from other things too, but one of the things we're learning more and more is it's coming from some of these airway issues. Dry mouth. So if you wake up in the morning, your mouth's super dry, that can be a sign. So I'm going to show you just for a minute what can happen with your jaw and your teeth as you're trying to get more air. So humans are really good at figuring out how to live, right? Thank goodness God gave us some good survival instincts. People will say all the time, they're like, oh, if I sleep with, like, for example, we use certain devices in their mouth to help people not have sleep apnea. They'll be like, well, what if I choke on it? I'm like, don't worry. If it gets anywhere near the back of your throat, your body will wake you up instantly. Little kids, like they choke, but if you have little kids, you know how surprised you are that they didn't choke more, right? And almost die more. So our bodies have these really good defenses against dying. When we start to not get oxygen from sleep apnea, generally what's happening, usually we're laying on our back and our chin relaxes a little bit and it starts to come back, and you can see by that photo as the chin comes back, the tongue comes back, it's going to close off that airway opening and it's going to start to occlude or to get closer together. So if we have enough air pressure in our lungs to open that, if it closes, but we can open it back up, then we get this cool musical thing where our throat, and that's right there, snoring. So if anyone's experienced that, again, snoring does not mean you have sleep apnea, but it is like 95% of people who have sleep apnea also snore. So they go hand in hand, and it makes sense because it's just a little further along the spectrum. But if you don't have enough air pressure to open that hole, to open that soft tissue back up in your throat, then it stays occluded. And that's where that happens. And that's an apneic event. That's sleep apnea. Well, what our bodies will do, if we're standing upright, and we can see this in people who already have some airway issues, even being upright, is they'll stand and they'll posture themselves in what's called the sniffer's position, which is this. Looks like I'm trying to sniff something, right? So by doing that, by posturing our head forward, we get our jaw forward, we can get a lot more air. And by the way, athletes do this. So what do you see an athlete doing when they are just gassed, right? They're like, we can take these big diaphragmal breaths, but also our airway open, just gravity pulls our airway opening open more, and we're able to breathe better. But when you're sleeping, you can't do that. So one of the things the body will do is grind their teeth forward and push your jaw forward. And that helps open the airway. And it's not a good thing to do, ideally, but it's better than dying, right? So we do it, but we see a lot of these tooth problems and oral jaw problems, TMJ, and a lot of other stuff come because people are just literally trying to breathe, just trying to survive, but it causes some other issues. We're going to talk about some oral devices here that we make that I'm going to tell you not to use real quick, but we'll go over there in a minute. What we're going to do now is do a quick little questionnaire. We're going to go through this together. You don't have to fill this out. We're just going to kind of work our way through it. But it's a really helpful tool that can help you determine if you or if someone you care about or love is a higher risk or lower risk person for sleep apnea. I use these questions all the time with patients. I don't ever tell them that I'm filling out a form, so you can do this without even asking somebody. Just ask them a couple little questions, but it just lets you know this person is a low or high risk. Again, not a diagnosis, just tells you whether you're high or low risk for sleep apnea. This is called the Stop Bang Questionnaire. So snore loudly. And by loudly, we mean loud enough that it's waking up someone in the room or it can be heard a room over. Are you tired in the daytime? By the way, this is like everybody. This is so many people. And what we actually call this is inappropriate tiredness. Inappropriate tiredness means you thought you slept well, and yet you're still tired in the day. Or I'll ask a lot of people, I'm like, how much is like, do you have coffee because you enjoy coffee in the morning, or do you have coffee because you need coffee? And so many people are like, oh yeah, bro, I need coffee. Like I need my multiple cups of coffee to stay throughout the day. So if you need caffeine to get through the day, there's a really good chance you're not getting enough sleep. And then on top of that, that's probably preventing you from getting better sleep. So inappropriate tired, not just like if you know you had a night of no sleep, you should expect to be tired. Observed apneic events. This is a big one, and none of these things are a diagnosis, but I'm just going to be straight with you. If anyone's ever seen you stop breathing or you've seen your spouse stop breathing, that is a pretty dead giveaway that you have it to some degree or another. So I'm going to just show you briefly what that is, so that if you sleep by someone you love, you can be creepy and watch them and determine if they have sleep apnea or not, okay? So an observed apneic event is generally going to look like someone snoring, then they're going to stop for a second, and sometimes they'll just stop for a minute, and sometimes you'll even see their chest kind of pulse a little bit, and then they'll gasp and go on, and it looks a little like this. So and if you've ever, I'll tell you, if you want to watch something interesting, go on YouTube and Google this stuff, and you're going to watch people like borderline dying, and their body looks like it's profound. In fact, interestingly, one of the most powerful things that motivates somebody to actually get this treated is watching a video of themselves almost die every night and watching your body like convulse as it happens. Interestingly, it's way more motivating to see yourself than even to watch another person almost dying in bed. So weird how that works. But if you see anything like that in your partner, encourage them to go. And I talk to people all the time who are like, yeah, I know, I've told my spouse, and they don't want to go do it. And that's cool. And I get that there's complexities in the relationship, but this stuff shortens your life, and it makes the life that you do live profoundly less enjoyable and less healthy. So do what you can do to encourage your friend or family member to get checked if you see an observed apneic event. Blood pressure being high, that's another big one. A BMI over 35. So I think someone was asking about it. We're actually going to give out tomorrow kind of a healthy weight chart. It's a little different than a BMI, but you can find BMI charts all over, super easy. Age, if you're over 50. So unfortunately, as we age, it becomes our soft tissue gets, we know this, right? We lose collagen, our soft tissue gets more and more elastic. That's why we get sagging skin and wrinkles and all that. Well, it happens in here as well. So the older we get, the higher the likelihood. A neck circumference over 16 inches. And sorry guys, just being male puts you more at risk. So you do that, add up your scores, and by the way, everyone's got this as a takeout. You can also Google stop bang and come up with a questionnaire off the internet, super easy to do. Here's a couple other common symptoms that we see with untreated sleep apnea. Concentration issues, headaches, clenching and grinding of your teeth, high blood pressure, I guess high blood pressure's in there. Mood changes. We just talked about how not getting good sleep affects our mood. It's profound in people who aren't getting good sleep. And well, we're going to talk about that in a sec. So what can we do about it? If it's mild sleep apnea, or what we call upper airway resistance syndrome, which is again kind of that mild form, then actually some lifestyle tips can be really helpful. Weight loss, probably the single most helpful thing. Sleeping on your side. Sleeping elevated, so they have these wedge pillows. You can order them off Amazon. They do a pretty good job. I've tried sleeping with them just because I recommend them to patients. I don't think they're overly comfortable. But if it keeps you out of a CPAP and you can get used to it, go nuts. Taping. Taping is, again, this isn't going to cure everyone, but just by taping your mouth shut, putting a little bit of tape, and I have a friend who's a dentist who does this, and it absolutely can be helpful. It just triggers your brain a little bit not to open your mouth. So if you happen to have developed a pattern of mouth, like maybe you can breathe through your nose, but you've developed a pattern of breathing through your mouth, just that tape can be enough to trigger your brain not to do that while you're sleeping, and it helps you breathe through your nose. And by keeping your mouth shut, and as it opens, it kind of falls back. So just keeping it closed, breathing through your nose, your tongue can stay more forward, and that can be helpful for some people. Avoid sedatives. This is super important. It's really common in the US to take some form of sedative to get sleep, right? Because that makes sense. You're like, oh, I can't go to sleep. I'm too awake. I need to take something to tone me down. So we take a Benadryl, or alcohol is a common one, a nightcap, right? Any form of sedative is going to create more relaxation in you than you would naturally have. And as those muscles and that tissue relaxes more, it's just going to close off more. So in general, sedatives are not great for sleep, period. We'll talk about that in a moment. But certainly if you have sleep apnea, it's even more detrimental. Okay, now, what if you have moderate or severe? And I'll just tell you this right now. I'm going to take a step back. I'm not going to be super critical of the doctors who treat this because I get that they treat huge patient loads and they see lots and lots of folks and they have to prioritize who they see. But I'll be a little critical in the sense that I see patients all the time who they're concerned, they know they're not getting great sleep, and they went to the doctor and the doctor's like, you're not severe enough, so just go do your own thing. I will tell you, if that happens to be you, where you're not severe enough, just push your doctor on it, and I'd be willing to bet if you press them a little, you can probably get a little better treatment out of it. But I personally think even mild cases, even cases that aren't even quite sleep apnea, upper airway resistance syndrome cases, I think they should be treated. Getting good sleep is profoundly good for our health. I think it's worth it. But what about the moderate and severe cases? So the most common thing we all know of is a CPAP. You either may know someone who have it or you've probably at least heard of it. What is a CPAP? It's a continuous positive air pressure machine or device. What that does, remember how I talked about when we breathe, if we have enough air pressure when we're snoring, it opens that hole. This just increases that air pressure. So essentially, no matter how much that closes down, that machine is going to make sure you've got enough air pressure to open up the airway and help you get air. And by the way, in my opinion, as rudimentary a device as this is, I personally think this is probably the best device for most people. It has very low compliance. If you want to increase your compliance, watch a video of yourself dying, and that might help. But I get it. It's hard. It's a pain in the butt to think of wearing something like that all the time. But the alternatives are not a ton. The alternatives have bigger trade-offs. So I don't deliver CPAPs. I actually make money as a business from the next device, and I try and encourage every patient I talk to please not do the device if they can, to go do a CPAP. But a CPAP is a great way to do it. Now, what if you can't tolerate? And there are some people, they've tried their best and they can't do it. And this is generally where a dentist will get involved from a treatment standpoint. Something called the mandibular advancement device. So it just pulls your jaw forward and it helps keep your airway open. It looks like a mouth guard that clips on the top, clips on the bottom, and they hook together, and we have a little tool that can regulate how open we get you. And we open your airway enough that you can get some air. It's a great device, and I can tell you of patients that use the word life-changing and will say things like, the last 10 years were a fog. I can barely remember it. I couldn't do a sleep app. This thing changed my life. So I am really grateful for it. And again, from a business standpoint, that's great for me. That's because I actually make those and do those. But here's the thing. It comes with trade-offs that a CPAP doesn't. It can cause lasting, sometimes permanent changes to our jaw, to our teeth. There are trade-offs. But if the option is, dying a lot sooner and having a miserable time on the way there, then sign me up for tooth changes, right? And the problems that come along with it. So in the right person, they're wonderful. But I would really encourage people to try other things. There's also some surgeries. We have a guy here in town, Clark Taylor. He moved here a few years ago. He has a relatively new surgery that he's doing. I'm just going to be straight up with you. It's a brutal surgery. They're cutting a big chunk of the face. They're actually remember how we talked about how as we get more and more, as cultures get more Western foods, our mid-face develops less and less, right? Well, he's doing the opposite. He's actually bringing this forward. I think it's an awesome surgery. It's just a rough surgery, and if you can avoid that with some other things, I think that's a cool thing to do, at least for a while. Okay, so wrapping up the sleep apnea portion, here's the takeaway in my opinion. If you suspect you have it, or you suspect someone that you love, or even don't love that much, but you like them a little bit, if you suspect they have it, please encourage them, or for you yourself, please talk to your doctor. I'm not kidding you when I'm telling you that it is life-changing, and more even than adding years to your life, which it does to get treated, it's that the years that you do spend here are going to be so much more enjoyable if you're getting good sleep. And all you have to do is talk to somebody who has it and who got treated, and man, are they going to tell you they'll probably use the word life-changing. And I can tell you I have patients with tears in their eyes. It's that powerful. It's that detrimental to get bad sleep for a long time. And you get used to it, right? And if you, I have not dealt with sleep apnea, but I have dealt with poor sleep a lot. And I can tell you that you just like we talked about, you just get used to it. You just go on. And when that transition happens and you start getting good sleep, man, that is a powerful, powerful bit of medicine. So, all right. on to our final section. So, what can we do if we're not getting great sleep? Or what can we do if we just want to get better sleep? And this, for me, and here's the wild part. I would have told you earlier, I always thought I was going to have to be on medication, just like my family members. And I would never in a million years thought that the things that I tell patients to do would work for me. Classic doctor thing, right? But they did. So I'm going to go through these. I'm going to tell you the ones that were really impactful for me. Some of them surprised me. But as I started putting, and I did not put like all 12 or 13 of these in right away. Just like we talked about for this whole seminar. Don't try and implement everything right away. Start with the easy things, take the low-hanging fruit, and grow from there. But let's go through some of these. Okay, so first and foremost, right here, it's actually tracking me. I was curious what my heart rate was during this whole thing. This is an Oura ring, which is that gold ring up there. The ring did not change my life, but the ring gave me the knowledge and information to change my life. And it allowed me to try some of these things and be my own scientist on my own person and be like, oh, that was really helpful. Or like, okay, that really wasn't worth the effort. It didn't seem to make a big deal for me. So I recommend to patients all the time, especially if they're resistant to talking with their medical doctor, like please just go buy a sleep tracker. They are cheap compared to the consequences of not getting sleep. I'm not going to say they're super cheap. The ring that I wear is about $300, and I pay about $5 a month for a data analytics app that comes with it. Some of these others, Shelli actually wears the one in the top left corner. It's called the Whoop Band. This is off of Amazon. It was like $50. This is a Fitbit. There's a bunch out there that you can get, and any of them are going to help you. They're going to be helpful for you. But I will tell you, if you're serious about your sleep, my personal recommendation is the Oura Ring. There's a ton of research that goes into not just it's not like it collects better data, but its algorithm and all of its advice is aimed around sleep. It's primarily a sleep tracking device, and then it's a sort of fitness tracker and step tracker and all those things secondarily. Alternatively, the Whoop Band, the one that Shelli wears, that's primarily a fitness device. So that's what it's aimed at. It still tracks her sleep. She gets some good results, and I've seen a lot of her stuff in mine. They're all going to be good. But if you're serious about your sleep and you really want to do that, then my recommendation is the Oura Ring personally. I just think it does a really good job of taking complex information. I mean, like what this thing gives us is what only doctors had access to like 5 years ago. I still have if anyone's done an at-home sleep test from your doctor, I have one of those machines. I used to prescribe it and send it home with my own patients. I'd get it back, I'd read it. And I kind of went away from that because, to be honest, like this stuff gives you maybe not as high quality of data, but instead of sleeping for 2 or 3 nights with like a giant bulky thing on your wrist, or 1 night in a hospital bed, like hooked up to a bunch of electrodes, you can sleep at home for 2 months and you can get a really good amount of information on that. And the Oura Ring really takes that information and makes it palatable to everybody, explains everything. And it'll help kind of coach you through what you can do. And this was super helpful for me. Again, I had been recommending it to patients way before I bought one and did it. But any of these devices are better than none. And as Shelli mentioned earlier, that which gets measured gets modified, right? Or gets managed. So when you pay attention to something, when you track something, I promise you, it'll get better because your brain is, especially if it's a new thing you've never done. If you've counted every calorie you've ever eaten your whole life, your brain probably learns how to do that pretty well. Maybe that's not as effective. But if you're going to start doing something new and you start tracking it, your brain just starts thinking about things differently. And things, you're like, oh, I remember this because I'm looking at my morning. Every morning I see, how I slept or what happens. And you'll start thinking about like, oh, what about this tip or what about that tip that we're going to talk about here? And how's that affecting my sleep? You'll just think about things more. You'll figure out your own problems more if you're tracking things. Okay. Consistent sleep schedule. So of all the tips we're going to talk about, this is by far the most powerful, and it doesn't work instantly because it has to build up your body has to get used to it, but it makes a really big difference long term. And it means sleeping at a consistent time. And they've actually studied this. And even if you get less sleep, but you stick to your sort of normal sleep routine, your normal sleep schedule, that the sleep you do get is a lot better than even sleeping more hours at a different time of day. So one of my buddies is a sheriff here in Bozeman. He loves night shift. He never, even on his days off, he sticks to that because he feels so much better if he's always sleeping. So he's like a vampire, and I never get to hardly see the guy. But when I do, when we cross paths, we've talked about it a little bit, and he feels great. And they've studied this in night nurses and a lot of other people who don't have normal or routine sleep patterns. But if you stick to your sleeping pattern, you're going to get better sleep than alternating that throughout other parts of the day. If possible, timing your sleep with your chronotype or with your circadian rhythm. So I'm going to talk about that just for a moment. This is something the Whoop band doesn't do, but if you wear an Oura ring, it's going to tell you this after about a month. So our bodies go through a natural cycle of temperatures. Okay? When we're in the morning, when we're just waking up, our body's at its coolest and it's going to start heating up throughout the day. It's going to peak for most people kind of mid to late afternoon. And then it's going to kind of level out, and then we're going to start to get cooler again. And our body should be getting cooler as we go into our sleep phase. If you can time that with your sleep patterns, with your natural circadian rhythm, you're going to get the absolute best sleep you can. The best way to so first off, again, there are devices that'll tell you. You can take questionnaires, but the best way you can figure out what your chronotype is to simply think about this. If you were to go on your dream vacation for a month, you had no schedule whatsoever, nothing to make you get out of bed at any particular time, about 2 weeks into that, what time do you think you'd be going to bed and waking up? And that's a pretty good indication of what your chronotype would be. We all know somebody who loved early to rise. Man, they just get up and they're cranking and they love waking up early. They go to bed at like 7 at night naturally. And then we know other people who are night owls, right? And most people are going to fall into naturally going to sleep between 8 to midnight, that 4-hour range. That's where the bulk of people will fall. And then naturally waking up between about 4 to 8 in the morning. So 6 to 8 at night, 8 to midnight to about 4 to 8 in the morning is where most people fall. My chronotype tells me to go to sleep at 10:30. I generally go to sleep a lot earlier because one of the things I'm about to mention, our society, it's getting a little bit better, but it's really hard if you happen to be that night owl personality. Because when do jobs start? They all start at 8, right? Or 7, or whenever. Yeah, or whenever. A lot of them do. Not every job, but a lot of that classic. And there's a stigma, right? If you're like a night owl and you like to sleep in, then what do people think of you? You're lazy, right? Get out of bed, you sorry bum. We tell that to our kids if they're sleeping in, right? Well, maybe they're lazy, or maybe it just has to do with their circadian rhythm, and that's genetically different for all of us here. And I said most people will fall between the bedtime of about 8 to midnight, right? But that's most people. There's going to be outliers who want to go to bed at like 6, or outliers who want to go to bed at like 2 in the morning or even more. And if you're one of those people, I would just encourage you to try and, as best you can, I mean, you can't, like certain jobs are just not available at like 2 in the morning, right? Other jobs are. But if you can plan your sleep pattern and plan your life and build it around your natural circadian rhythm, you're just going to have a happier life. It's going to be a lot easier. Can you change your chronotype? A little bit. So again, I would be the perfect example of this. I used to go to bed at between 10 to 11 most nights. And as I kind of started down this health journey, it just came to the unfortunate realization that if I was going to get a workout in, it was going to be in the morning. And that, pardon my French, that sucked for me. It was really brutal. And so it started low. I think Shelli told you when I first started, I was only working out twice a week because that's the only amount that's just how often I could drag myself out of bed. But as you do that consistently, your body can adapt to a degree. I probably will never be a person that wants to go to bed at 4 to 6 in the afternoon and wake up at whatever. But I feel really comfortable now going to bed. I actually go to bed generally around like 8:30 to 9. Something in that range, and I wake up at like 4:30 to 5, something in there. So it can be adapted to a degree. So if you know somebody who has a vastly different sleep schedule, especially if they happen to be on that later side, just take it easy on them. Don't be judgmental. Because here's the thing, it's really hard to fight against that, especially if you live in a world that's not built for you. But back to this, whatever you can do, stick to a consistent sleep schedule. It's going to be beneficial. Optimize your sleep environment. So you want it cool, dark, and quiet. It could be quiet as in silent, or it could be white noise. I personally sleep with a fan. Shelli used to sleep with nothing, and now she's adapted to a fan because I can't sleep without a fan. But it needs to be either that kind of monotone fan-type noise, white noise, or it needs to be silent. Lights in your bedroom are a way bigger deal than we think. This is one of the things that I learned. We used to have like more light sort of pollution into our room. And when I cut that out, I noticed a difference, like the first night. And I was wearing this, and that's another cool thing that I love about these, or any, is that you can see like, oh, when I try this thing, does it actually make a difference? And I was able to see that one made a difference for me. A comfortable bed, sounds obvious, right? Warm feet. This one I actually just implemented about 4 or 5 months ago. And I was like, I'm not going to bed with a warm water bottle or socks. That's dumb. I don't want to like get out of bed, look like that, right? To be vain. But it made a big difference. And I could see it right away in my sleep. And counterintuitively, we just said keep the room cool. So you're like, well, why would I want my feet warm? Our temperature is dropping at nighttime. That's what's supposed to be happening, right? If we have a part of our body, one of the extremities, our hands or our feet, that are cold, then our body has to warm that. So our body actually has to increase the core temperature to get warm blood out to the extremities. So again, counterintuitive, but by keeping your feet a little warmer, if you get cold feet, your body doesn't have to do that, and your core temperature can stay a little bit lower. This is maybe one of the biggest differences for me personally. By the way, you're going to try some of these things and they may not work for you. That's totally okay, but this one made a big difference. Increasing early exposure to sunlight and then decreasing later exposure to sunlight. I don't personally seem to be as affected by the light later in the day, but the first time I drove to work and I took my sunglasses off, and I mean, I was like, my eyes hurt. I couldn't hardly I was like, I'm going to wreck. Couldn't see because my eyes just weren't used to it. I took my sunglasses off, I drove to work, and I slept like a baby that night. And that was like 10 minutes of sunlight. I have a pretty short drive to work. The more sunlight you can get early in the day, the better. It helps your hormones sort of regulate. It helps all your sleep. It helps you produce melatonin. There's a bunch of things that it does, but and that's tough, by the way, for those of us who live in Montana in the winter. So all I would tell you is do what you can and get as much sunlight as early in the day as you can. If that sunlight can be outside, all the better. If it's in front of a window, that's fine too. There are some new devices that are supposed to put out like artificial sunlight. I will tell you, if you can get these little apps on your phone that let you measure lumens, like how bright things are. Looking into this light seems super bright, pales in comparison to a cloudy day standing by a window if you look at the amount of lumens that like the sun produces. So there are some new things coming out. Feel free to try those, but if you can get natural sunlight, it's cheapest and best. You may be one of those folks who is affected by screen time late at night. And this actually isn't even just screen time. It's even the lights in your house. If you can start to dim the lights, I do this now a lot where I'll start to, then the last hour before I go to bed, spend more time with less lights if I can. Seems to help me. The screens don't seem to affect me as much, but they do affect some people a lot. By the way, a TV in your bedroom, I'm sure you've heard this before, bad idea. A TV that's on in your bedroom, like worse idea. So do your thing, no judgment, but I guess a little bit of judgment, right? I just judged it, I suppose. But okay, this kind of makes sense, right? Avoid stimulants, so caffeine, nicotine. This next one might not make quite as much sense, but we talked about avoiding sedatives. It's super common in our culture. I realize, know your audience, right? In this room, this is maybe not as big a deal, but you might know someone who thinks that alcohol is helpful for sleep. And you can always talk to them without being judgy and just let them know that it's actually not as good. And if they ever start measuring their sleep, they're going to see that. Most sedatives, including prescription sedatives that are given out, do not actually improve the quality of sleep. They help you get a little more bad sleep, but they really don't help. We really don't have good medication. We don't have a good pill that helps people get good quality sleep, at least not on a sort of statistically when you look at lots and lots of people. Some people will find better sleep with other things, but sedatives just don't do a great job. And alcohol in particular, and a lot of other sedatives really mess with our REM sleep, which again, we talked about how REM sleep has a lot more to do with our emotional processing. So people who deal with sedatives can feel like they get great sleep and be significantly less emotionally regulated because of it, because that's affecting that part of it. Be cautious with heavy meals and spicy food. So I can see this on my ring every time that I eat within an hour of when I'm going to go to bed. Like if I don't get 2 hours after, Shelli doesn't seem to struggle with this at all, but I like try to get home and get dinner made as quick as I can because I can see a measurable difference in my sleep. Generally we're talking about even healthy food. It doesn't even have to be heavy. That might affect me more than it affects you. There's other people who seem to be able to eat heavy foods and go right to bed, but I can't even eat healthy foods and go right to bed and sleep well. So something to keep in mind. Regular exercise. I talked about how exercising helped me sleep better, but sleeping better helped me exercise better. Like it's just this, rolling wheel of compounding goodness as you start putting these things in your life. That was a terrible analogy. I apologize, but they all feed on each other, and as you exercise more regularly, you will get better sleep. And actually, because we've been prepping for this, I also haven't been exercising quite as much this week. I haven't been sleeping as good. I'm not sure if it's from the stress or whatever. I'm not sure, but it is really helpful to get regular exercise. Just be careful not exercising too late in the day. Exercise raises our core body temperature, so if your body temperature is always already on the way back down, then you're going to deal with this sort of conflicting signal. Interestingly, I will tell you, I have to work out because of my schedule. I have to work out in the mornings. I know my circadian rhythm. I know my temperature is probably not even beginning to go up when I work out. As our inner core body temperature naturally rises throughout the day, we get stronger and we get faster. And on the days that I get to work out in the middle of the day, which don't happen that often, but occasionally I'll get like a day that works out and I get to work out, all of my lifts, all of my weights go up. I mean, it's like a noticeable difference just being able to time. And that's not, look, whenever you can work out is going to be beneficial, but it's just kind of cool how powerful just something like our natural body temperature really is. There's so many cool complexities with our body, you guys, that are just beyond any of our comprehension. It's going to be cool one day when we get to heaven and God gets to explain like, oh yeah, you could have also done this little tweak and then it would have been amazing too. But relaxation techniques. Reading. I read, this was really helpful for me. I read every night in bed. Even if it's just a couple pages, it just helps kind of tone my mind almost every night. A warm bath or a shower, or if you happen to be so lucky as to have a sauna. So we just talked about how the sort of conflicting idea that as we warm the extremity, our body can actually cool off inside because our body doesn't have to warm our extremity. Conversely, I don't know if anyone's ever done cold plunges, which are awesome. Don't do them to go to bed. But you'd think getting in cold water would drop your core temperature, but it doesn't. It does the opposite because now your body goes, oh, I have to heat the outside of my skin. So your body is warming itself up to try and get warm blood out to the extremities, which is why it's a wonderful thing to do in the morning. It makes us more alert. It wakes us up. But anyway, at nighttime, a warm shower, a bath, a sauna, great. Deep breathing. We've talked about that a couple times. So I know that Emily talked about box breathing. The physiological sigh, we've done that a time or two here. Here's the rub. Any slow, deep, especially nasal breathing is going to help calm things down. It's going to help just get you in a state that's a little calmer and more rested for sleep. I was listening to a guy who's a breathing coach talk through this, and someone asked him some question about like how to breathe particularly, and he was like, dude, like just breathe. Like just take slow, deep breaths. If it's not through your nose, take it through your mouth. But these big lung expansions, they have effects on our blood flow, on our capillaries. We just don't do that a lot, right? If you're exercising, you're going to get some of that. If you're stressing, you're straining. But if we have a relatively sedentary lifestyle, there's a really good chance we're never taking big, deep breaths. So it's good for lots of stuff. Calming music, light stretching. I did this for a while. I don't do it anymore. But a few minutes of, does everyone know what cat-cow? Has anyone ever heard that? So you're on your hands and your knees, and you kind of like arch like a cat, and you go, meow. You don't have to do that. And then you, or I forget which one's the cat. Ooh, my back just cracked. You literally just get on your hands and knees, and you arch while doing a deep breath. And then you do this. I might have said that backwards. You can look it up on YouTube. Do that for a few minutes. That made a big difference for me for a while. I've gone away from it. I seem to be okay, but that's another thing that seemed to be really helpful for me. A couple more, and then we're going to be wrapping up. Pre-sleep routine. This will just probably develop over time as you become a better sleeper, but sticking to that routine, your body starts to know, like, okay, I'm reading the kids a story. I'm, turning down the lights. I'm brushing my teeth. I'm taking a warm shower. And your body, if you stay in this pattern, then your body's like, it's sleep time. In fact, my Oura ring was telling me right before we started, like, it's time to start winding down. Get good sleep consistently. Sounds obvious, right? But as you get more good nights of sleep, your body is going to sleep better the following nights. If you have multiple bad nights of sleep, you'd think you would be sleepier and you'd sleep better. But even if you get a better sleep that night, it's not going to, especially if you start tracking it, you'll see it's not as good a night as you'll get when you're getting consistent good nights of sleep. Use sleep aids sparingly. Feel free to play. I would definitely encourage sort of the natural sleep teas. Even melatonin, I would say be careful with. You can definitely become habituated to the over-the-counter melatonins. And you can take those things. If you don't take melatonin and you ever want to try it, get a small pill and then cut it up into quarters. I mean, like a little extra bit can make a big difference. If you do need to use them, no judgment. Shelli and I both used them this week as we were like not sleeping quite as well. Melatonin seemed to help us. Doesn't work for everybody. But use it sparingly and be aware that basically all the pills that help you sleep you can become a little more dependent on those. And lastly, if you have a medical sleep disorder, please get it addressed with a doctor. Do what you need to do to get good sleep. It's a big deal. Okay, guys? Prioritize your sleep. Make what changes you can. And this is about progress, not perfection. And again, that goes for everything we're talking about this whole weekend. So that's it. Thank you. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
I've always heard that if you don't go to bed early, like if you stay up way late, those hours are not as effective as the others. Is that still true?
So what I have read about this is that I was taught the same thing. I don't know if it was at Southern, maybe. We had someone who's like, the hours that you get before midnight are worth double. Doesn't seem to be true. And in my own experience of tracking this, on the nights when I have slept early or later, it doesn't seem to make a huge difference. Like if I go to bed really early or really late, I haven't noticed a big difference. I'm not going to say that's not the case. I think a lot of that depends, again, on your chronotype. I think that's probably the most important thing because there are certain people that like just don't want to fall asleep till 2 or 3 in the morning. And for them, they're never getting I guess they're getting pre-midnight sleep for their whole night, aren't they? Just the day before. But I think the most important thing you can do is be consistent and sleep as close as you can to your chronotype. And if that happens to line up with that, then you should do that. But I don't think everyone has to I don't think the sleep early in your night is better. I will say this, your deep and your REM sleep do happen at different times. If I remember correctly, your REM sleep is earlier on. And I have seen this on like trips where we're flying, we have to spend the night in an airport and you get this terrible sleep. And I'll get like a lot of deep sleep, but no REM sleep. And it's like, my whole brain is fogged. So that could be part of it too. That could be just missing a particular portion of your night affects different reparative processes more. But in general, it seems to be like as long as you're sleeping on your kind of normal pattern, that you're probably going to be okay.
So then, what about the total hours that's sufficient? Is it different for everybody? Like Chris could survive on 3 hours, and I would be...
Yeah. Okay, so I'm not going to call out anyone by name here, Chris. Okay, Tomorrow, we're actually going to talk a little bit about how science applies to large populations, because I think it will help us understand some myths around nutrition. But it also applies to this. When you look at how scientific studies are done, you're going to see results come out on what's called a bell curve, right? And the bulk of your people are going to be right here. But there's going to be outliers, and the farther you get going out, you actually get like orders of magnitude different in how that goes. So people are really different. We weren't built the same. Clearly, it's time for some sleep. And I don't want to say that there is a person out there that could not function on low levels of sleep. I didn't ask him if I could use his name, so I apologize, Seth. But Seth has told me for a long time, he's like, I just don't need a lot of sleep. That's fine. So I'm not going to say that that's super unhealthy. What I will tell you is when we look at studies of large populations, that it is not healthy to be under 7 hours. That seems to be the health window on average for the majority of people seems to be about 7 to 9 is where most people fall. If you're under that, it seems like you're going to have hormonal challenges, physical challenges, emotional challenges, all these types of things are going to compound. And I guess the best way you could test that would be to take the person who functions on low sleep, and if they ever do start to get more sleep, see how they feel, and if they like it better. So I don't want to say no, but I will say that when we look at all the literature on sleep, like there's nothing ever recommending that you get like 5 hours of sleep. It's all 7 at like the minimum. And those studies that I told you about where they cut people's sleep and they didn't lose weight, there was another one they did that same thing with weightlifting. So they put them on a weight program. They took half the group, they cut 2 hours of sleep, and they had virtually no gains, no muscle building. Like it's that profound how that happens, how much sleep helps. But again, there could be individual outliers where it could. So I don't want to say no. I would say just listen to your body and maybe try getting more sleep and see how it feels. Yes, ma'am.
Does your phone check how your body temperature rises and falls? Does it ever start to match your pattern of sleep? Like, for example, for you,
Right.
start to match their bedtime?
Okay, so I don't know of any studies that say that they do. And what I can tell you is that my ring still tells me that my chronotype has not changed. What I can tell you is that I have adapted a bit and I seem to go to sleep real easy between 8 to 9 o'clock. And that was not always the case. So my assumption is that more of what happens is that you have a kind of a flex zone where you can probably play in and go a little later, a little earlier before you're just feeling like miserable. And that's where you can adapt to. I don't know that answer, but I do know that my temperature variations have not changed since I started wearing the ring. Anyone else? Yes?
The sunlight, is it really just for your eyes or your whole body?
It's your eyes. Well, I guess, what do you mean? I guess define that question.
In the sense of, does it help to get more sleep if you're just taking your sunglasses off?
No. Yes. It has to be directly into the eyes. It is like going to Florida, walking around in a tank top and shorts in the morning with sunglasses on. Like that actually still might be better. I don't know about that, but all the stuff that I've looked at and certainly what worked for me, it has to be in the, and that's what I've always heard people say, is that it's got to be in the eyes. It kind of makes sense, right? It's like light. We perceive that mostly through our eyes. I don't think it would hurt to do more, and you could always try it and see how that works. And I will tell you, if you're a sunglasses person, like my sunglasses now just sit on my truck. I like never wear them because I know that I only wear them if I'm doing something active outside. But it's harsh. Like if you've gone 10 or 20 or more years wearing sunglasses, your eyes are going to be real upset at you the first time that you get a bunch of sunlight in there, and it hurts, but you'll adapt to it. And for me, that one made a big difference. Anyone else? Okay, thank you guys so much for coming. I think Ryan already said it, but remember, you bring your folder. You'll get some more handouts tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to go over diet and nutrition, and really we're going to try and give you the ability to pick out the diet that is most optimal and healthiest for you. And I hope when we leave, there will be some clarity around that because of all the areas we're talking about, at least in my opinion. The one that I hear the most conflicting information on and I see the most damaging stuff said and counterproductive stuff said, and it seems to be around diet. So we're not going to be controversial. It's going to be quite the opposite, but I hope you'll leave there with a pretty good idea of what is the healthiest diet for you. Thank you guys. Happy Sabbath, and see you tomorrow.